I'm doing. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Oh, my pleasure.
How's your day going?
I don't know. It doesn't suck too badly in the middle of the pandemic era, I suppose. I'm having a glass of wine, so that helps.
That definitely helps with the nerves.
Mm.
Done a bit of research on your history in being an author, and I'm a bit blown away, would be the first thing I could say. You have touched so many topics in your life as an author. I have a great interest in writing myself. It's something that I wish to someday pursue. And I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you, I mean, just history and writing, what got you into it? What got you into writing about so many topics?
Oh, well, I discovered after a lot of hit and miss that I wasn't any good at anything else. So, I tried selling hamburgers and driving a school bus and I don't know, all kinds of things. And after I was in the Navy for a few years, courtesy of Uncle Sam. I went to Vietnam, and so when I got out, I thought I'd try my hand at journalism. I'd, been a feature writer for my high school newspaper, and I seemed to do all right there. So I latched on to the GI Bill, enrolled at UCLA's journalism school, and the rest is history. I wound up right out of grad school at UCLA. I got my first job as the Norco City reporter for the city of Norco, which I had never heard of. But I accepted the job because it was the only one that answered my resume. That was my first job way the heck back in 1973, I guess it was. And I've been writing ever since.
That's amazing. I hope to one day reach a level close to what you have accomplished in your lifetime. I know writing is not the easiest thing, and just being able to touch on so many topics, I really do look up to you as a writer, sir. But I guess
writing's a snap. All you do is get in front of a computer like this, and then open a vein.
Exactly, let it flow, right?
I can't remember who said that. It was like Hemingway or something.
That is a great
quote.
Great quote, definitely. Just gotta let things flow. But I guess to kind of get on topic on the things that are ongoing now, like I'd mentioned to you before, I was doing research on a few new books that I was interested in reading, and up popped what I'm considering one of my most anticipated reads of the year, your new book, which will be releasing on the 27th. Operation White. Oh, you already got a copyright that I'm waiting on mine still. But yes, Operation White Rabbit, LSD, the DEA, and the Fate of the Acid King, referring to the great Leonard Pickard. And I mean, I guess I haven't been able to read too much into it as I don't have my copy yet. But I am curious about just your relationship with Picard. I mean, what sparked the interest in it? I mean, yes, he is the Acid King. Yes, I mean, I grew up reading all his stories, really looking up to him. He is one of the greatest psychedelic martyrs of our generation, if not the biggest. I mean, I'd love to hear where the interest was sparked. I mean, were you just always part of the psychedelic community?
No. As a matter of fact, I was not a member of the psychedelic community at all. I'm a journalist, and your first question having to do with the various topics I've undertaken in my lifetime is kind of indicative of where I'm coming from. Something grabs my fancy, something that I find interesting, and one of the great things about being a journalist is that if you like grad school, I was once told by a journalism instructor, then you're in the right profession, because journalism is grad school forever, because you wind up involving yourself in a topic. And if you become any good at it, you you're in it all the way. And what I've done over my lifetime, first as a newspaper reporter, and then later on when I started writing books, is I will find something that intrigues me, that taps into my own personal philosophy in one way or another. And then I immerse myself in it, and I come out the other end usually with a book. And you know, I don't think I'd trade what I've done over a lifetime for anything else. I'm not rich by any measure. You know, I'm okay, but I'm not knocking the world dead, and I'm like, you know, 3 or 4 paychecks away from poverty like everybody else these days. But nonetheless, what I've been able to do is latch on to a subject and pursue it all the way to the end. So specifically to your question regarding Leonard and how I got involved with him, that goes back to 2005. At the time, in 2005, I was writing with another journalist. We'd done 2 or 3 articles for Los Angeles Magazine and LA Weekly, and she her name was Linda Marsa, and she's still, you know, at it. Same with me. The other thing about journalism is that you never retire, ever. Linda was a medical writer and still is. I mean, she's very good at what she does, and has written for virtually every magazine and newspaper that covers medical issues in the country at one time or another. We had just wrapped up a story about a phony baloney would-be Nobel Prize winner who had phonied up his research on gene splicing. And
he was up for a Nobel Prize?
Well, he said he was.
Oh, I see.
I'm not sure that he was, but you know, he was very good at advertising himself. And he was head of the genetics lab at USC, so he was no small potatoes. But the unfortunate thing for him is that he had a side hobby of molesting young women, which we discovered and wrote about in a 7,000-word expose in Los Angeles Magazine. So as a follow-up to that, Linda called me one day and she said, "We have to go to Switzerland." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I haven't been there lately, but why do we have to go to Switzerland?" And she said, Albert Hofmann is celebrating his 100th birthday, and they're going to have a big week-long celebration, and everybody who has ever had anything to do with LSD at one time or another is going to be there. And this will be an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to corner everyone who has been involved in psychedelics over the past half century and interview them. And I said, sounds like a promising idea.
Yeah.
So we contacted several magazines, but the only one that bit was Playboy. which was, you know, not doing all that hot at that time, but was still around. And they offered us a contract to do a Q&A with Albert Hoffman. You know who Albert Hoffman is.
Yeah, I mean, I know a little bit about him.
Yeah.
I mean, being in Switzerland, was this an opportunity to also meet all the other people that were involved in Sandoz? I imagine
Of course.
everyone
Yes.
must have been there.
Yeah, it was, yeah, everyone was there. And what we did was a third part of this triumvirate was my then film and television agent, a guy named Jeff Ross, who has since passed away. But Jeff joined in, and the three of us pooled our resources, and we took off to Switzerland to do this to do the Q&A with Hoffman for Playboy. But our further idea was to try to get everyone that we could find on camera and create our own archive of interviews with people who were involved in the early development of psychedelics. And we got to Basel, Switzerland, hired a local camera and sound team to film us. And then we set up shop in the lobby of the hotel where the whole celebration was taking place, and grabbed everyone who passed by and sat them down and interviewed them about LSD, their role in it, how they got involved, what their observations and beliefs were at the time surrounding the government's crackdown on LSD and psilocybin, mescaline, and so on and so forth. And you know, we got like I don't know, 20 or 25 hours of film of many of the pioneers of the psychedelic movement.
And I feel like I should know the date when this occurred. What year was it that Albert Hoffman turned 100?
It was January of 2006.
Okay.
And he lived a couple of more years. I think he died at 102 or 3, something
right.
like that. At any rate, I mean, we interviewed Ralph Metzner, what's her name? Joanna Harcourt Smith, who's dying at the moment, as a matter of fact, in Santa Fe. Leonard told me about that just a week or so ago. She was, Timothy Leary's lover, who spirited him out of Switzerland to Afghanistan before the CIA tricked him into coming back to the U.S. Sasha and Anne and Sasha Shulgin were there. We got to be very good friends with them. Oh God, let's see. I can't. John Halpern, who figures into Operation White Rabbit, he was there. In fact, that's how I first came upon the name Leonard Pickard, because of Halpern. I mean, these, if you are at all familiar with psychedelics, these names would mean something to you.
You're dropping all the pillars of the movement. I mean,
Myron Stolaroff was there. We interviewed him. The two guys who wrote the definitive history of psychedelics, Martin Lee and God, I can't remember the other guy's name. I should have been better prepared, but I mean, there's all these stellar people who were involved in the movement from day one, and what we wound up with after we finished was this pile of video that, we still have, which was and is pretty precious, I think.
No, that
But
sounds like an amazing wealth of not just knowledge, but I mean, it's personalities that you're able to capture that are very rarely captured.
right, Rick Doblin, he sat for an interview.
Oh, Mr. Doblin. I
Yeah.
actually did quite a bit of volunteering for MAPS,
Did you
psychedelic
really?
science. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been involved in MAPS and the Zendo project at a
Up in
volunteer level for many years.
Santa Cruz or in Boston?
Well, I'm in San Diego, but I volunteer just through like online
Oh,
paperwork that I used to do for them. But
yeah.
back in 2017, when psychedelic science happened in Oakland, I was there from the start, just setting up, putting things down, making sure that all our guest speakers had what they required and what they needed to provide us with
Well,
with a nice presentation.
you are the next generation, and I am happy to be of service to you because you are the future. I am the past.
Well, I appreciate you saying such things, but truly, I mean, our generation would be nothing without the knowledge from the past and just the warriors that fought so heavily for this. And I'm happy to see some sort of psychedelic renaissance starting to occur again, because there's been so many ups and downs. And I feel now, come 2020, seeing Oakland decriminalize, St. Mary's decriminalize, I mean, we're starting to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm stoked. I'm stoked to live as long as I can in this post. Man, I mean, we're still going through the war on drugs. But
yeah, well, there's no question about it. But at any rate, I mean, I'm getting off topic here. The whole point here is that that we found all of these people, we befriended them, and they welcomed us into the community, even though none of us outside of Linda had ever taken LSD. We were certainly stoked when it came to the whole concept, and had experimented with other drugs, of course, but it was a real revelation in a half dozen different ways. So by the time we got back to the U.S., we got together and decided that we would try to put together a documentary based on what we had gathered. And we tried mightily to find someone who would back us. We could not. So we just went ahead and subsidized the project on our own and continued to find and interview people. Back in the U.S., we interviewed Stan Groff, and shortly before he passed away, Abramhofer, Humphrey Osmond's partner in the earliest LSD experiments in Canada. Laura Huxley, we went up to Aldous Huxley's house, just beneath the, you see the H of the Hollywood sign right outside his window. And that was where Huxley died, and famously passed away. He was dying of cancer, and he asked his then wife, whom we interviewed, and we've got the whole story on camera. Laura, he asked Laura to administer 25 cc's of LSD to him intravenously, which she did. He passed away, and as he was dying, the reports for first coming across the TV about the assassination of John F. Kennedy in Dallas at the very moment that Huxley passed away. So anyway, we started gathering all of these interviews, but I had first heard back in Basel when we were there for the Hoffman celebration about Picard. I mean, In fact, there was a brouhaha at the time during one of the discussions sections because Halpern had testified on behalf of the government against Picard, not of his free will, but because they pressured him and said, if you don't testify, you'll go to prison too. So Halpern bowed to the DEA and testified against Picard. And as a direct result, the people in the community, everyone from the Shulgins to Mark McLeod, who called him out, and a whole slew of other people, really came down on Halpern, which I think, looking at it in retrospect, I'm not sure that that was fair or right, because he was saving himself. Maybe the right thing to do would have been to stand up to the DEA and say, I won't do it, but then he probably would have wound up doing 20 to life too, like Apperson and Leonard. So as I went further and further into this project, I kept hearing about Picard. So I took it upon myself to find out where he was, which prison he was in, and sent him a letter, saying, I'm interested in your story. Sounds to me like you got a raw deal. What do you want to, would you like to talk to me? And he was pretty forthcoming, insofar as getting back to me, and we exchanged letters and eventually phone calls, and he introduced me to his lawyer in Topeka, Kansas, who represented him at trial. And I don't know, the more I got involved in Leonard and his story, the more I felt it was a gross injustice, mm-hmm. and that somebody ought to do something about it. But in my experience, 9 out of 10 people who say somebody ought to do something about it, say it and then don't do it. Right. So I decided that I wasn't going to be among the 90%, and that I was going to go ahead and do something about it. So I started, researching and recording my interviews, and I talked to my agent in New York and said that I wanted to do this book, and she tried to get a publisher interested, and no one at the time, back in the early, 2010, 2012, there around that time, no one was interested in LSD, and everybody thought it was passé, and that Picard was a lost cause, and so I couldn't generate any interest. But that didn't, lessen my own interest, and I continued to push ahead. And when Leonard got email in prison, we started exchanging emails, and then I managed to get past the Bureau of Prisons and arranged to meet him in person. So I started going to Tucson, where he was incarcerated, and met with him 2 or 3 times, and encouraged him in his writing, because at the time he was trying to put together his version of what had happened. Right. And the result was the Rose of Paracelsus. Mm-hmm. I helped him with that. I helped, I acted as his quasi copy editor
Awesome.
and gave him access to my research assistant, who also did a lot of copy editing and did some research for him as well. And, you know, he came out with the book, and you know the whole history of that. He's
Right.
developed a cult following all over the world.
Of course. I mean, through the almost 20 years that he served, I mean, he always stood ground kind of with the idea that he had been mistreated, right? I mean, the amount of LSD they say they found in the silo and all those things was never really proven. So, I mean, was a big part of your, you know, just encouragement to get the story out there that, because I mean, I find a lot of holes in the reasoning behind the DEA to give this man the sentencing that they did.
Well, you're going to have to read my book, Gus, because yeah, that's kind of the guts of it. But you know,
Right.
in short, the short answer to your question is yes. The DEA set him up, and they, you know, it's classic entrapment. There's a DEA agent named Karl, oh, is it Rhodes? No, I keep going to Rhodes, and it's not Rhodes. It's Karl, because I'm thinking of Dick Nichols, Karl Nichols. Dave Nichols he figures into the story too. He was an LSD, well, he was into studying LSD at Purdue and worked with Picard after he got out of prison the first time. But at any rate, Nichols and company, you know, they set him up. That is, they made a deal with a guy named Gordon Skinner.
Right. It's the Crystal Cole involved gentleman, right?
Oh yeah, and so many more. Gordon Skinner was, he was born in 1960. He grew up in Oklahoma. He was a spoiled brat. His mother she indulged him in everything. And
His stepfather was the IRS guy, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was with the IRS, and then allegedly he had ties through that association. He had ties with the U.S. intelligence agencies, and also was sort of a distant authority entangled with the DEA. He ran in law enforcement circles, and you know, he got Gordon Skinner, out of a whole bunch of scrapes as he was growing up, because
Right.
Skinner, from high school on, was basically a drug dealer.
Right.
But he also was enamored of psychedelics, and decided that somewhere along the line that he was going to, I don't know, become his own version of Sasha Shulgin or Leary or whatever. And
But was Skinner also involved in chemistry, or was he more just on the, you know, pushing of the chemicals?
I think that he thought of himself as a behavioral scientist.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was involved in the chemistry from high school on, but you know, purely from the standpoint of what he could produce that would get him off and his friends off. And
Gotcha.
he was certainly, I wouldn't call him a chemist, and certainly not a scientist, because he had no respect whatsoever for the scientific method. You know, he tried to, one of his early ventures was an attempt to synthesize mescaline from peyote buttons, and was caught with a gunny sack full of peyote buttons when he crossed the Mexican border at one time. One of the scrapes that his stepfather got him out of. But the point to all of this is that Skinner was a bad customer, even back then, was involved in purposely overdosing one of his minions in the Atlas missile silo. And based on the testimony of several of the people who were with him at the time, essentially caused the death of this guy. So he was, if not guilty of murder, certainly of manslaughter, and was so charged. But the DEA wanted to save their star witness, so they went into the judge in the matter and swayed him to drop everything. So, Skinner skated out of that and literally believed from that point forward that he could get away with murder.
And this would be way before the Brandon Green situation?
Oh, yeah. This was, in fact, this was about a year before the missile silo bust.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he was charged after the fact when the state authorities finally got their act together and charged him. But by that time, he was the star witness for Nichols and the DEA in the case against Picard, and they couldn't have all that dirty laundry revealed to the jury, so they swept it all under the rug. They did the same thing in terms of the raw materials that were used in manufacturing the LSD, because they really didn't find that much LSD at all. I mean, they found traces in a cane dye less than 7 ounces, as I recall. It's a really minor amount of LSD, not the millions and millions of doses that they advertised to the media. But what they did point to justify their case, the DEA pointed to it's called ergotamine tartrate.
Right, the precursors needed for the synthesis.
Exactly, it's the distillation of the rye fungus that is
the ergot fungus,
the logical basis of LSD. And there were canisters, dozens of canisters of this stuff. And Leonard and Apperson when they were arrested, they found, I don't know, a dozen canisters, something like that, whatever it was. But Skinner, unbeknownst to Nichols or anybody at the DEA, had carted several cases of this ET off to his girlfriend's house and hid it in the ceiling over her bedroom, and didn't get around to telling Nicholas about it until almost 2 months after Leonard had been busted. And then after he revealed that and they confiscated that ET, he later came back and said that there was several other canisters that he neglected to tell them about. So you start looking at the whole history of Skinner and his relationship to the DEA, and it's pretty plain that they arrested the wrong guy, because Skinner was the one who knew where all of the chemicals were and hid them from the DEA even after the bust. But again, that was something the jury never heard about, because they didn't want to wreck his credibility any more than he had already wrecked it himself. I don't know. I mean, the whole government case, when you take a look at it after the fact, was flimsy at best. That's not to say that Leonard was guiltless. Leonard was no choir boy.
Right.
But on the other hand, they threw the book at him when all they had was a pamphlet.
Right. I find it also odd because, I mean, like Skinner has accounts of, like, even like in 2003, I believe he got caught with almost a pound of MDMA, Burning Man, and a few things like that, that really, like you were saying, take away from the credibility quite a bit. And the fact that they did so much to make sure that would hold for so long. I mean, this is 20 years almost that we're talking that it took for Mr. Picard to finally get some sort of justice. And, you know, that really, I don't know, man. I can't wait to read your book for these specific points that I'm obviously unknown to me, but I know that there's such a big web that really paints a much different picture.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think you'll find, I mean, given your depth of knowledge of the case as you've revealed it to me so far, I think you'll find a lot more revelations in Operation White Rabbit, because I go into detail on all of these issues. And, you know, my conclusion is you're correct. Leonard was given a raw deal. He was railroaded. If you are anti-psychedelic, which I am not, and which I think is a whole other issue in terms of the government and its propensity for regulating its citizens and what they put into their bodies,
Right.
When they really have no moral right, in my mind, whatsoever to say or do anything about that, unless, you know, the action of taking a drug causes harm to others.
Right.
That should be, excuse the expression, the acid test.
Exactly.
And the government doesn't do that. I mean, since Richard Nixon forward, he and Rockefeller, the governor of New York State, were on the forefront of criminalizing every drug that you could think of, except for the two that kill more people than any other drug in the world. Right. You know, tobacco and alcohol. You know, they don't say boo about that, but you know, oh, LSD. Well, I challenge you or anybody else to find a legitimate case to me of LSD killing someone.
I've seen quote unquote overdoses hundreds of times in my life.
Did they die from it?
No one has died. They have, if anything, reached a new understanding of their place in reality. Maybe had a little put into their placeness, which it tends to do at those doses, but nothing that I would say they're going to be any worse for. It really does feel just like a war on consciousness, a war on the expansion of our thought pattern.
Well, I think that, there's all kinds of arguments to be made. I mean, when we interviewed Hoffer, Avram Hoffer, he brought up, the fact that they were using LSD back in the 1950s. He and Humphrey Osmond were using LSD to treat alcoholics in Saskatchewan. And their cure rate, was phenomenal. It was like 55% of the people who dosed on LSD, and they didn't have to do more than 2 or 3 sessions, never touched alcohol again. They just didn't. And, those results have been replicated dozens and dozens of times in other clinical trials. But, and this is key, the liquor industry, combined with big pharma, did not want that information made public, and they certainly didn't want LSD to be legitimized as a therapy for alcoholism, because that would, big pharma depends on repeat sales.
Mm-hmm.
You take LSD once, maybe twice at the most. And, unless you want to, unless you are a social drinker or whatever, you never touch alcohol again. I interviewed a guy. It was kind of cool, actually, because there was a guy, this is long before your time, but the precursor to 60 Minutes was something called CBS Reports. And they did like a weekly kind of investigative feature thing. And there was a then famous TV reporter named Charles Kuralt, who for many years was known for doing his on-the-road segments for CBS News. But Charles Kuralt went to a hospital in Maryland, where I went after the fact to follow up on this story, in 1966, and met with a guy who had been committed by his wife for alcoholism. He was not just a chronic drunk, but he was killing himself with alcohol. He was like 28 or 29 years old.
Oh, wow.
And Kuralt interviewed him. He did a before and after. He talked to him on the grounds of was it Springdale Hospital, I think it's the mental hospital in outside of Baltimore. He interviewed him beforehand and talked about his alcoholism and how it wrecked his life and so on and so forth. And then they filmed him when he was in the midst of the LSD trip. And then they talked to him afterwards. And he and a woman who suffered from bipolar disorder, who went through similar therapy, they were the heart of this special, this CBS News special. And both of them, after the fact, they were re-interviewed 10 months after they'd been treated, and they both testified that
that LSD had ended their torture. One, his alcoholism, the other guy, or the woman, the housewife, her bipolar disorder. I couldn't find the housewife. I don't know if she passed away or whatever, but I tracked down the alcoholic who went on to be a successful accountant and then a financial officer for some insurance company or something in Baltimore.
Hmm.
And I interviewed him on camera 50 years later. And I have him on camera saying, I took the LSD exactly 2 times and I've never had a drink again in my life. And his wife made the same statement on camera. And his kids, all grew up with the father, and a couple of them joined the Marines, for God's sakes. And he said, this has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with which side you are on. This has everything to do with does it work or does it not work? And I'm here to tell you that it works. It saved his life.
That's actually the main reason I got into psychedelics. Growing up, I had a ton of friends with substance abuse issues.
Mm-hmm.
Some alcoholic, but unfortunately with some of them it was opiates. And I mean, I was 16 years old the first time I saw someone go through it and not want to touch opiates again, not want to touch alcohol again. And I mean, this was a repeated thing that happened in my social circle, at least. I was lucky enough to get to see that early on, see them that there was an option to these addictions, not just going to rehab and getting on Xanax and getting on, more stuff that they're going to get you on.
Yeah, I mean, the whole antidepressant thing is just another scam.
It's horrible.
I mean, the big drug companies would not survive if they couldn't, assure their shareholders that they had repeat customers. And that's what this is all about. They're not out there to save humanity. They're out there to get you to take, Xanax and renew that prescription and get the insurance companies to subsidize the whole thing, because that's how they make their money. And you come along with something that you take once or twice and you don't need it anymore. You don't need anything anymore. That kills their business. They don't have any business. They might as well, be selling solar panels or something.
And the most unfortunate thing about that whole scenario is that they are lucky enough to have doctors and physicians who the general public looks up to for advice as their main vendor and shill. They've just created a system in which, I don't blame them. You got all these kids coming out of med school with $1 million in debt. If they're getting any sort of bonus from anyone, they're going to take it. They got to get themselves out of this. And the system just creates for a very easy way to corrupt those who are supposed to actually be helping us. And no, you're right, man. The pharma system has just, oh God. I mean, they've been lobbying longer than I've been alive. They got they got everything they could possibly want, and they're in all the right pockets. So, oh God, they're a big machine that I'm hoping we can slowly.
Do you know who first brought heroin to the United States of America?
Well, I'm sure it was them. Who was it?
Does the company name Bear mean anything to you?
I could imagine it was them.
Yeah.
Oh my God, of course.
And let's see, I think it was Merck. I may be wrong on this, but cocaine was first brought to the United States in the mid 19th century. I believe it was by Merck. But what we now know to be big pharma first got involved in all of this in their pharmaceuticals because they were snake oil salesmen. They were, these were the people who were running around the country with medicine man wagons saying, buy this elixir here and it will cure everything. Those were the forefathers of the CEOs that are now running big pharma, and it's I don't know. The genes will tell, I suppose. They're still doing it to this day.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very interesting thing that I've never really thought about. But I mean, with these snake oils and just like the new introduction of cocaine and opiates at the time, it would have been very easy to sell some snake oil or whatever that really is just cocaine and opiates that would make people feel amazing.
That's what it was.
Without people having any knowledge.
Yeah, laudanum was the big cure-all in the late 1800s, and laudanum was nothing more than an opiate compound.
Really?
Yes, and cocaine, I mean, you know the story of Coca-Cola.
Right, right.
And Coca-Cola was originally the reason that people were addicted to Coke was not because it was so delicious and it came from Atlanta, but because they were getting dosed on cocaine.
Yeah, of course.
They didn't take the cocaine out of Coca-Cola until, I think, after World War I.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, nothing was controlled. There was no schedule until 1970.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank Richard Nixon and his manufactured war on drugs for the creation of both Schedule I and the DEA. There was no Drug Enforcement Administration until 1970, and it's hard for me to think of a more useless overall bureaucracy,
right,
in the federal government, because everything that the DEA allegedly does that's good, and you can count all of that on one hand, was handled before and could be handled now by the FBI. The Drug Enforcement Administration is a self-perpetuating bureaucracy that has done nothing but damage to thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people.
Of course.
And I mean, how it continues to exist is both a travesty and I don't know. I mean, I think I can't say enough bad about the DEA. I think it's an utterly worthless, oppressive government agency.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. They seem like goons with an agenda more than anything. At the end of the day, I haven't ever heard of.
They certainly were in the Picard case. Exactly.
And I mean, I've never heard them do any sort of harm reduction in the community or anything like that. It's all arrest, throw people in the system. I've never really thought about it until you brought it up now. I mean, I've never liked them, but you just got me thinking. I've never heard them do a single project to actually help the community. There's never been any tax dollar that's gone to them that has in some way shown benefit to you and I and the kids. I mean, even the DARE program that we had, which growing up did nothing but create confusion in my generation, at least. It created confusion, it created fear, and those kids that went through that, if anything, were a lot more ill-prepared to deal with the temptation of drugs on the street than those that didn't.
Yeah, I mean, nobody bothered to get into the trenches of finding out why it is that people actually use drugs. I mean, if in fact it's this scourge and it entices young people, why is that? And what is at the base of all that? nobody really wants to take a good hard look at what causes addiction and why does addiction persist.
Well, yeah, mental health is attacked in a very weird way in this country, especially since the 70s.
Yeah, well, and because it became a political issue.
Right.
And both Nixon and Reagan and Clinton, to some degree, exploited the hell out of it for political purposes, to show that they were tough on criminals.
Right.
Well, you know, they manufactured these criminals.
Right.
People who are doing time for drugs, some of them probably have done you know, other crimes, but I would submit to you that the majority probably have done no, quote, crime, end quote, other than use or sell drugs.
Right.
And, you know, that becomes a crime. Why? Because the government says that you can't use it?
Right. Yeah, the amount of nonviolent drug offenders out there that are serving either life or it's too many, man.
Yeah. And Leonard is like, I don't know, Leonard's a case in point. I'm just, I don't know. His case is, this is me and Leonard, like me and Bobby McKee.
An awesome picture, man.
Yeah. Man.
So, I mean, speaking of Leonard, I mean, what do you think are his plans now that he's, you know, out and free? I mean, I know he's still doing what he can to advocate, but is he kind of falling off and trying to rest now? You know, trying to just get away from all this BS?
No, 3 days after he landed in Santa Fe, he got a job as a paralegal with a local law firm.
Oh, you don't say.
That specializes in representing Native Americans. So he's been in and out of tribal courtrooms for the last couple of months. And last I heard from him, I don't know, 4 days ago, 3 days, I don't know. He was up to his neck in legal briefs, but doing it, you know, or arguing on behalf of others.
That's fucking awesome.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good. That's a very good, I guess, outcome to the madness that he had to endure.
Pretty much. In fact, he just celebrated his 75th birthday, I think. You know, this past week. It seems to me his birthday is the 21st, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, this month anyway.
Well,
So, you know, God bless Leonard, and you know, here's to you.
these sort of repressive things shouldn't have even happened to begin with, but now that they did, and now that this is the timeline that we are so blessed to be in, it is good to know that we're at least getting some traction, and that the people that have done so much for us, you know, are still paving the way. It really does inspire me, you know, to continue doing as much as I can.
Well,
to one day make sure that people are going to rehab and getting a hit of LSD and not just, you know, more opiates and Xanax.
yeah, you know, that's really the end game, I think, is if in fact you take a blotter dose of acid and it opens your eyes, and at the same time, you know, shows you in a visceral way how you connect to the universe, and how what you do to yourself in terms of flagellation and self-punishment, does nothing and no one any good. All of that is just, you know, for the betterment, I think, of all of us. And I sincerely hope that we are at the threshold, maybe, of a renaissance. I don't know. It's, especially in this country, it's probably unwise, foolish even, to be overly optimistic. You know, I got overly optimistic during the Obama administration, convinced that somehow we were on this righteous path towards, you know, genuine equality and,
Oh yeah, the promises of social equality were made.
all the rest of it. And then, you know, we get like alpha and omega. We go from the very best president of the past 50 years to the very worst. And it's like, you know, I don't know, this country, this culture, never ceases to surprise, and not always in a good way. So, but I am, as insofar as psychedelics are concerned, though, Gus, I really genuinely am encouraged by what I have seen happening in just the past 4 or 5 years. And, you know, I've been on this road for more than 15, I guess. It's been quite a while. And, you know, the whole microdosing revolution and the rediscovery of mushrooms and just the general acceptance at higher institutions of learning, Johns Hopkins and NYU and UCLA, and, you know, I was intimately involved at the very beginning in Charlie Grobe's experiments with psilocybin at UCLA, and I saw it. I mean, I saw it firsthand. I saw what happens. You know, and you get to be my age. I'm like, you know, I'm afraid to tell you how old I am, but you can guess. You know, you begin to think about your mortality, and you begin to think, well, you know, hell, COVID has taken people that I know, and I'm ripe. I'm the right age, and any number of things could and inevitably at some point probably will afflict me. So the whole idea of the end of life experiments that Grobe pioneered, and then later on were picked up at Johns Hopkins, those are of great interest to me. And I think you're going to see a real revolution, and probably we're right in the middle of it, actually, with the dying off of the baby boom generation, because we were all born and bred on it and told it was taboo, and that Tim Leary was some sort of a madman. And now here we are at this point in our lives where we have to confront the great beyond. And I've seen what psilocybin does for people who have metastatic cancer, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and it changes them. I mean, they recognize at a spiritual or at a gut level what many of us believe at an intellectual level. But, you know, this simple chemical compound, psilocybin or LSD has a stronger effect, but it's the same basic thing. But what it does, is it gives you a front row seat to the universe and how we figure into it. We race around and expend most of our lives and an awful lot of our energy trying to figure out the answers to the big questions. What am I doing here? Why am I here? What is consciousness? What is my purpose? Bloody, bloody, bloody.
Okay.
You drop acid once, you chew a few psilocybin mushrooms, and presto, you don't have to ask the questions anymore, because you don't just know intellectually because you read a series of books or you're into Kierkegaard or whatever. You know because you feel it viscerally. You get it. You get it. It's like you get it. You go, oh,
Exactly.
right. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
We really are. I mean, all of the platitudes and the trite old bromides that make up Aesop's fables, things that we, have dusted off and thrown out because they were old hat. All of those aphorisms begin to make sense, and you go, shit, of course, this is true. I mean, I fit in because I'm supposed to be here, and I have to learn some stuff. And there's like both a level of acceptance, and at the same time, a note of encouragement about, life is for learning.
Yeah.
And you never, ever stop, ever, not ever. That's why I say, journalism is both a curse and a blessing, because you never retire. You never do retire. And
We just get to do amazing things and learn new things, though, man. And I mean,
well, and that's what you're doing right now.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So don't stop. Keep it up.
Thank you. I do appreciate that sentiment a lot, actually, coming from someone with such a beautiful track record as you're on.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'll take whatever you can give me.
Very, very modest, very modest. You were talking earlier about all this footage you guys have from years ago, from that 100th anniversary of our man Hoffman. Any plans to do anything else with that? Because that sounds like, I mean, that's the ball right there. I can't think of a.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go at this point, but I've had a couple of serious documentarians approach me to see about selling them the rights to Operation White Rabbit. They'd like to do it. One guy wants to do it as a 4-part documentary series for Netflix. The other guy wants to do 5 or 6 parts for HBO. I don't know exactly how it will go, but both of these guys, and I'm really pleased about that, about this part of it. Both of these guys got what I was trying to say in terms of the history of the evolution of LSD. I mean, there are all these incredible characters that were part of both the early and the middle history, and not just the obvious people like Tim Leary, but people like Al Hubbard and Huxley, and a psychologist named Oscar Janiger, or Dr. Oz as he was known. I mean, all these incredible, colorful characters who were involved in the development of psychedelics from the earliest days. And what I tried to do in part in Operation White Rabbit was, for the first time, put together kind of a definitive look at that history and those characters and who those people were, because they were all, you know, inspiration to Leonard when he was coming up. And both of these documentarians get that, and they are going, you know, we need to try to tell that story, but no one has really done it before. Martin Lee tried to do it and did a pretty fair job as far as it went in his now classic book about LSD up through the 1990s. But as far as a, you know, a visual presentation, I don't think it has not been done. It's been done in bits and pieces. You know, you have the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, a documentary done on that. And, Tim Scully cooperated with some guy who did something for Netflix. But anyway, this history should be told.
Yes.
And what we originally decided we were going to try to do after the initial foray into Basel was try to put it together as a 5-part series called the Acid Chronicles. And I started, I hired a couple of editors, film editors, and wrote a script for the 5 parts, and actually put together pretty solid versions of the first 2 episodes and a big chunk of number 3. The 4th and 5th episodes are still upstairs in the hard drive. But ultimately, I would like to, I would like to tell that story. I would like to start at the rudimentary beginnings, all the way back to Albert Hofmann and his famous bicycle ride in 1943 through the streets of Basel, and then you know, take it to the U.S. and the CIA's early involvement, and MK Ultra, and Al Hubbard, Johnny Acid Seed as he was known, and Huxley, and Ken Kesey, and Leary. I mean, the whole history is just so mind-blowing and well worth the time and effort. That's what I would like to do, but thus far I haven't been able to, you know, get the backing or the belief of anyone in a position who could actually pull the trigger and make it happen. But I've been, you know, gathering video as I go along. As I say, you know, we have probably 60 or 70 hours of video now, so
Yeah.
it'll happen someday, I'm sure.
Oh, it will. And I mean,
It'll happen.
I hope I can in any way, shape, or form be a help on the project, man. That is one of the most important projects, I think, historian wise, of our generation, you know, of our timeline, of our century per se. I mean, this is one of the things that a lot of people will, you know, fail to realize, even those that would be considered normies that are not part of the psychedelic culture. But if pop culture isn't just the leakage of psychedelic culture, I don't know what is, you know. And it'd be nice for people to have a good understanding of what has been shaping their vision of reality per se, because yeah, I mean, it's doesn't get any recognition, and that would I think really, yeah, just people have that education. I mean, that would change their whole perspective about this whole thing, this whole mess that we're all stuck in at the moment.
Well, it might. I mean, I can be more cynical than you, but then I have a few years on you, so.
Hey man, I understand, but at the end of the day, I mean, I've seen the impact that organizations like MAPS, thank God for Rick Doblin taking the time that he has and attacking the project in the way he has, because it could have gone many different ways, especially with the Zendo project and all of that. And I will say that at least a big portion of my generation is very excited to see some change and to move away from the damages that we've seen occur. I mean, everyone in my generation has a friend or family member that has either passed away due to addiction or is in the midst of it, and
Yep.
for people like me, it hurts when I see people stuck in those addictions that are unwilling to explore options other than those allowed by their doctors or whatever.
Right.
So I mean, getting the history out there and getting all that, I feel that that's motivational to most to maybe dig deeper and actually start thinking for themselves.
Well, we're starting to make some headway. I think the whole, Michael Pollan's book was a real breakthrough, and has encouraged people to come out of the basement and be more forthcoming. And I have hopes that the clinical studies that are now underway and that are addressing everything from smoking addiction to obsessive compulsive disorder and PTSD. I mean, all these afflictions that people have had to suffer from all these years needlessly, when there is a quote cure, end quote. It's not a cure, but it is a legitimate means to an end and not a party drug that is going to bring everybody into the gutter. That's just bogus crap that the DEA says in order to get its budget renewed by Congress for another year.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Well, we're at the cusp of change.
Cannabis is a big. The whole thing is like 10 years ago. People were still being sent away for like 10 and 20 years for possession of a baggie of weed, and look where we are today.
Exactly.
We really are moving ahead, and people are wising up to the truth of drugs that are truly effective and not just crutches. They experience it themselves, and they don't just depend on Dr. Feelgood to tell them how they should conduct their lives. So, in your generation, hopefully, we'll see some real grassroots changes.
I mean, that being said, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but it sounds like the near future holds a lot more work on psychedelics, right? From the sound of it.
Oh, how do you mean?
I mean, just because looking through your works in the past, you've done so many different things. I mean, I guess what I'm asking more than anything, I mean, do you have like some new topic that you've been looking into, or is the goal more to dive deeper into the history of psychedelics?
Well, I'm working on a very personal project at the moment having to do with my late daughter and the mental health system.
Oh, God, I'm very sorry to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, but, you know, I mean, indirectly, it probably, you know, it does have echoes of the psychedelic work, because I genuinely believe, belatedly, that had she gotten into the right treatment with the right psychologist who understood psychedelics, that it could very well have helped her. So to that end, yeah, I guess I am continuing to pursue that. And then, you know, I mean, there's the whole idea of the documentary. I would have a hand in that if that comes to pass. And
Of course.
I don't intend to, you know, just walk away from it after, now that the book is published.
And my hope that one day people will be able to go see someone and get the proper help, even if it's not having your doctor being able to give you the psychedelics, but at least having a psychologist that understands reintegration and just different ways of using these medicines in order for the patient to alleviate whatever anxiety, stress, ailment might they be having. So no, man, I think taking on mental health is it's definitely hand in hand, and it's one of the, in my opinion, if not the most important topic in our country at the moment. No one is realizing that all of the real societal issues and just all this crazy nonsense that we're stuck in sometimes is because of unchecked mental health. It's not spoken about at home. It's frowned upon.
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's precisely the cart I hope to overturn, because yes, you know, when people have mental problems, the tendency is always to sweep it under the rug or give it another name, or hide it away. You know, you don't want anyone to know that you've got a crazy uncle or a catatonic son or whatever. I mean, it's and that has to end. I mean, the implications for all of us and for the culture at large are just enormous. And they don't, you know, it's not as simple as somebody's wife going off the deep end or being bipolar or schizophrenic or being delusional. It's far more, I don't know, every time there's a shooting, every time there's a mass shooting, every time a school is shot up by a crazy, well, you know, that's the operative word there, crazy. You look at these clowns after the fact, and their mugshots show these people, and regardless of who they are, their eyes are, they're huge white crazy eyes. They have no eyelids. They look like they're on something, or they've returned to a feral kind of being. And I mean, they are suffering mentally health issues. These people are, I don't know. I mean, it just blows my mind that you know, we do not recognize it with the whole BLM thing. I mean, a good many of the people who have been shot dead by the police had mental health issues, and the cops didn't know how to deal with it other than to shoot them dead.
Exactly.
And that happens every day. Every day it happens across somewhere in this country, around the world. The cops have no idea. I mean, with rare exceptions, they have no idea how to deal with people who have mental problems. And they come up with some BS excuse about how they thought that they were brandishing a weapon, and they kill them, and that's it. And it happens all the time. And it has to end, because people have to recognize that, you know, all of us, there is not a family, there's not a person in this country who doesn't have some relative, some close friend, somebody down the street, somebody they've known in their lives who has been brought down by mental problems. But we don't talk about it because that's something that's taboo. Why the hell is it taboo? I don't know.
People are ashamed, man. It's one of the most pathetic just responses to stress, in my opinion, that we have all just kind of agreed to play along with. I mean, I come from a Latino background. In Mexico, they're still putting a little autistic, or, you know, whatever the situation might be with the child, in a little dark room in the back of the house until they die. I mean, there's horrible things going on. And the fact that here in America, we treat people the way we do, we're not far away from that here either. I mean, you know, at least we have CPS and stuff in this country, but believe me, if there was no CPS, people would be doing the same thing. And
whereabouts in Mexico are you from?
Guanajuato.
Oh, Guanajuato.
Yes, lovely place, the hub of culture and art in Latin America. I love it down there. Haven't been there too much recently, obviously with the COVID stuff, and Mexico going through a full-blown warlord narco battle right now, which is just tearing apart such a beautiful country and such beautiful people. But you know, that which is also due to the war on drugs, that wouldn't be happening if it wasn't a thing, you know. So yeah, but no, I completely agree. I think mental health should be on everyone's mind, because, you know, we've all felt down. We've all felt a little bit of that depression, be it seasonal or whatever, and even that is joked about. Even things that most people, you know, go through, and we joke about it instead of you know, having a quick chat, maybe going out for a walk with your friend, maybe stopping them from doing whatever silly thing he might do, you know. But yeah, so I mean, Mr. McDougal, I won't take up too much more of your time, but just want to thank you again.
Oh, well, you know, you got my number. Call me anytime you want.
I will take you up on that.
Just at a later date, perhaps.
I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. Maybe after I had a chance to read through that book, we could sit down a bit more and chat.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, Mr. McDougal, I appreciate your time again, and thank you again. Just appreciate all the work you do. We really do need more people like you on this earth doing and sharing the proper things.
I'm not sure my ex-wife would agree with you, but
well,
I appreciate the sentiment nonetheless.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. McDougal. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Have a good one. Goodbye.